The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 12th Doctor story, Mummy on the Orient Express, or as I like to call it, Throw the Mummy from the Train.
Oh.
I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel is Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
Good dad joke. How's it going, Dom?
Very good. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Jimmy can't join us this week, but he'll be back next time. Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt or phone case or mug or whatever with great caricatures of the three of us and the TARDIS by visiting sqpn.com/merch, M-E-R-C-H. There's some great stuff, swag there you can pick up, and it's a lot of fun. I want to tell you about another show on the network that you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Star Trek, which the three of us also do, and you want to check that out wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Trek. But this time we are discussing Mummy on the Orient Express, this 12th Doctor story. And Father Cory, are you able to do a recap for us this week?
I can do a recap.
Awesome.
The Doctor takes Clara for one last trip on the Space Orient Express, a spaceship that looks, sounds, and smokes like a classic luxury steam train. They barely have time to settle in before people start dying from the foretold, a mysterious mummy that appears only to its victim for 66 seconds before they die. Of course, not everything is as it seems, and Gus, the train's computer, reveals that the passengers have been gathered to learn how to detect and capture the mummy. The Doctor figures out that the mummy is choosing its victims by going after the weakest first. He tricks the mummy into choosing him so he can figure out the mummy is actually a soldier viewing his victims as enemy combatants. At the last second, the Doctor surrenders to the mummy, which then salutes and disintegrates into a pile of cloth and dust. Gus is displeased that the mummy wasn't captured, so he tries to kill the remaining passengers. The Doctor, however, is able to use the mummy soldier's transporter to move everyone into the TARDIS and escape to safety. At the end, Clara lies to Danny Pink and decides to continue traveling with the Doctor. And as Jimmy says, the end.
The end. Okay. So this is our second time talking about this. We talked about this one when it first aired, these many years ago. 8 years ago, I think it is now. Yeah, 2014.
Yep.
So revisiting this was a fun revisit. Having seen this one before, talked about once before, revisiting it is fun. And just to start off, this picks up a plot thread from I think it was the 11th Doctor story, The Big Bang, where he mentions, he got a call about an Egyptian goddess loose on the Orient Express in space.
Yeah.
And which this is not an Egyptian goddess. That's a bit of misdirect there. But it's interesting. Do you think it was planned that way, or did they just kind of say, "Hey, that was an interesting little thread. Let's go back to that."
I wonder if it was originally that was one of those. Oh, the Doctor and Clara went off to another adventure. Or Doctor and whoever, I can't even remember who was it. Clara
Amy and Rory at the time.
Amy and Rory.
Yeah.
Okay, Doctor and Amy and Rory go off to another adventure. And of course we'll probably hear about it someday in Big Finish type of deal. And instead, and then of course now they're in the 12th Doctor, and it's like, hey, you remember that plot thread we had? Let's pick that one up. And this time instead of being an Egyptian goddess, it's a mummy, and instead of being Amy and Rory, it's Clara.
Right. Yeah, that's my guess is what they were doing here. And it's a fun premise. The idea of, okay, it's the Orient Express, but not. Everybody's dressed up. And so what you're getting is basically an Agatha Christie crossover sort of story,
right,
where, instead of being Hercule Poirot, it's the Doctor and all of this that entails. And so I kind of like this one. This has always been a fun one to me a little bit, because there's some good plot in it, some interesting, whodunit mystery sort of stuff. So I kind of enjoy that part of it.
And I enjoy it too. And not so much for the whodunit, although I kind of enjoy that as well once in a while. And I'm very much a train geek, as if you've listened to Secrets of Tech, I've mentioned that before. And so, despite the silliness of a train that looks like a train, it smokes like a train, it sounds like a train, the interior looks like a classic, luxury liner train. It's still kind of cool, this train snaking through space, blowing its horn, and it's just like, okay, it's ridiculous, but it's cool.
Yeah. I think, like Jimmy likes to say, it's like a fairy tale in space. The plausibility is a bit out there, but okay, let's go with it.
But it's Doctor Who, and we like to call Doctor Who sci-fi, but it really is science fantasy. I mean, it is. Doctor Who is very much science fantasy, and this just kind of plays into that and does it, I think, well. I think it really did well.
I wonder, though, could they have done it as a historical, like on the Orient? If they had tried to do it on Earth, on the Orient Express, some of the bits might not have worked as well. I mean, they would have had to make it in an Egyptian mummy, maybe an alien, thing. And
I don't think it would have to change all that much.
Yeah.
Obviously, like the kitchen staff being spaced, that you couldn't do. But maybe there could have been something where, somehow the computer, which would be anachronistic for the time, ejected them from the cargo.
Train.
Yeah, ejected them from the over a cliff or something, over a bridge or something. Something like that.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's. I mean, not that it was bad for not being that, but I just kind of feel like there were times when you could do it more as a historical. I'm always on the historicals thing. So I just kind of feel like you could have done it that way, but they did it this way, and that's fine.
But it was still fun. It really still was fun what it ended up being.
Yeah. So there is a kind of a trope. There's a classic. The series of victims and whatever it is, the horror, the monster, whatever, coming for them one at a time. The implacable enemy that can't be stopped. I mean, we've seen that so many times. Just in Doctor Who, what was that one that Jimmy hates with the Minotaur in the hotel?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I'm terrible with titles of episodes.
Yeah, me too. But that one is also a similar story. You have each person is marked for death one at a time. There's no stopping it. I mean, it's really a version of that same story. But this one is done much better, of course, than that one. That one was, it had its major issues.
And absolutely, and actually, one thing I do like about this one is they explain why it's unstoppable, and because it's doing something before it even touches them. It changed,
right.
So they basically reveal that the mummy is out of phase. We know this from Star Trek too. They go out of phase and they can't see them, and it takes over a minute, 66 seconds to be exact, to pull you out of phase with the mummy so the mummy can then absorb your energy.
Right. Although I have to say, there's a couple of problems with this. Is one, it pulls you out of phase, but everyone can still see you. So you're not technically maybe out of phase a little bit.
You're in between. You're in between the two phases.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So there's that. Yeah. That was a little bit of a plot hole. But also they brought up the fact that the mummy is taking the weak first, those who have whether mental or physical health issues.
Yep.
But I don't think it ever explained why. Why would this soldier be going after the weak first?
Because they're the easier targets, I'm guessing.
Yes.
I mean, they really say it, but like in the summary, I said that he views them as enemy combatants. Because that's basically what it is. The fact the doctor surrenders to stop the mummy.
Yeah.
Says, you're no longer an enemy combatant because I've surrendered to you. So it maybe says like these are the weaker of the enemy. It's easier to go after the weaker ones first. And I'm sure there could be some, in-universe explanation about the weaker ones. They're easier to drain their energy or pull them out of phase or whatever.
Yeah. Although they never do tie that up or close that loop. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there could be explanations for that. And then there was the other thing was that whole idea of surrender is the one thing no one ever would thinks to do in that moment. Like it's like people try to bargain with it. In fact, that one professor who dies tries to bargain with it, but no one ever thinks to surrender to it, and that's the one thing that saves you.
Exactly. And it is interesting that turns out to be a soldier that surrendering to it is what stops it.
Right. And the reason it's coming is because you have its flag, the standard, that it's trying to recover, that it thinks that you've taken, and then it's trying to recover it. So the surrender. Yeah, I was just thinking of kind of extending like the metaphor, the surrender metaphor to the spiritual life, but that's probably a stretch.
That would be a little bit of a stretch of this one. Yes.
So it all starts out with the doctor saying that he thinks this is a good choice of a last adventure with Clara. And then later on, he implies or outright says that he knew coming to this train that this wasn't just a let's take a train ride and have some laughs and have some fun. That he knew that this was going to be a life-threatening adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that was intentional on the doctor's part, in part to remind Clara of why she wants to travel with him, to kind of win her back?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think so. Yeah, I hate to say it. I think it was the doctor being manipulative of Clara. And of course, that's what the doctor does. The doctor, I hate to say it, he can be very manipulative sometimes. And this was definitely one of them. And she rightfully lets him have it for it. I mean, because he knew, again, we talked about it going all the way back to the 11th Doctor, that he knew that this was more than just, hey, let's go hang out on a space train and eat and drink and be merry.
Right. He'd been invited several times to be on this train by Gus to solve the mystery. And at the end, like he comes right out and tells Clara that she's addicted to the TARDIS, and he's feeding that addiction. He's intentionally trying to, and that seems to be a thing among some companions, isn't it? That they get, especially in the modern era, the newer era, they kind of get addicted to traveling on the TARDIS, and when he leaves them behind, they go through a kind of withdrawal for some of them.
Yeah.
And seek out adventure. I mean, that was the way it was with Mickey and with
Martha.
Martha, I can never remember her name. I don't know why.
Rose. Rose was more by necessity than she had to start fighting me by necessity. Even
Donna had to be mind wiped.
Yep.
So yeah.
Of course, Amy and Rory, even though they spent time off the TARDIS, you could tell that they wanted to be on the TARDIS instead of.
Yep. Even like Sarah Jane, who we saw in the Vampire Bat one. That's the Bats
School Reunion.
School Reunion. That's right. It turns out that ever since the 4th Doctor left her behind, she's been out on her own doing things. The Sarah Jane Adventure Show and all that sort of stuff, and that she's been trying to do doctory stuff. And we keep seeing that with other companions. In fact, it was the novel that Sophie Allred wrote about Ace,
right?
Continuing on to do the companion sort of stuff over the years.
And I have a feeling, with the upcoming special, the Regeneration special, the 13th Doctor, we're going to see that as well. I'm sure it's going to come up with both Tegan and Ace, because they're both going to be in there. That they've both been kind of working behind the scenes doing that kind of stuff.
Right. And speaking of 13th Doctor, Yaz was another example of someone who's kind of become addicted, although there's the whole other romantic thing that they added in too.
Not worth mentioning. Well. But that is a theme that they've really developed in New Who, that these companions get, like you said, addicted. I mean, addicted is really the word. They're addicted to the adventure. They're addicted to the excitement, and they don't want to let it go. And that's something you really didn't see a lot in classic Who. Of course, we've talked about before, there have been times the companions just got dropped off and that was it. Never saw them again. But you really didn't see them, fighting that. Do I really want to stay? Do I not want to stay?
Yeah, like we just talked about a few weeks ago, the chase.
Yep.
And with the 1st Doctor and Ian and Barbara, at their first opportunity to go home, they took it. The Doctor was kind of offended, but they were like, "No, we're going home. It's been 2 years. We're done. We never intended to stay in the first place. You kidnapped us," which they don't say, but that's what happened.
And they did enjoy the adventure. I mean, they did say that they enjoyed the adventures, but it's like, we've got an opportunity to go home and you can help us do it.
Right. And I wonder, though, does the Doctor pick his companions based on people who are likely to be the sort who enjoy death-defying adventures? Because that's what it is. Like, I look at it going, I wouldn't mind taking a trip on the TARDIS, but I don't want to go risking my life on a regular basis. That would not be fun to me. That doesn't sound like aliens trying to kill me on a regular basis and barely escaping. Because we look at it's a TV show. Of course, they're going to
Mhm.
survive to the next episode. But from inside the story, they don't know they're going to survive, and so that just seems like so maybe he's picking people who are likely to get addicted. This is a very dark turn toward the doctor here that we're taking.
Well, and again, this is something that's been developed much more in New Who, where there's almost kind of a mystical sense of the doctor of who should be his companion and who shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that it is very much like that.
In fact, we get a companion offer in this one that doesn't get picked up, right?
Yep.
The engineer Perkins, the doctor kind of hints at the doctor that he's interested in the TARDIS and the things that the sorts of things that can be done, and the doctor hints back at him that maybe do you know anyone who'd like to take a crack at fixing the TARDIS? And Perkins thinks twice about it and decides not to. But I thought that was kind of interesting.
Which
I would have liked a lot of those. Yeah,
I would have liked that if that had happened, where he slowly the TARDIS starts getting better, starts getting fixed. Every episode, something else starts working better, and then one day the chameleon circuit works, and the doctor says, "No, break that again."
Yeah, exactly. Or it's fixed, but he still wants it to look like a police box.
Yeah.
That was Perkins was played by, we talked about this before, Frank Skinner, who is a known actor and comedian in British TV. And so, this was sort of I think Jimmy calls it stunt casting.
Yeah.
This more famous person, although American audiences probably aren't as familiar.
He looked familiar, but he was a fun character. I liked him.
Yeah. I do too.
He could kind of talk on the doctor's level a little bit, at least, with the technology and everything.
Yeah. I mean, he's more than the usual background cannon fodder that we have in these episodes. He sort of had the doctor's ear, and they had a rapport, and I kind of like that, and I do think it would have been fun to see someone like that on the TARDIS who is on the doctor's technological level, who could actually make the TARDIS better. I think that's a fun idea. I think Well, it was fun too because he was dressed in classic railroad overalls and cap. I mean, he looked about as blue collar, salt of the earth, just keep the train running type person. And it turns out he's brilliant. Yeah, he's a Scotty chief engineer sort. So
yeah, exactly.
So going back to the Doctor and Clara's last hurrah, they have this conversation as they arrive where the doctor's kind of avoiding. He doesn't really want to talk about it, but Clara does. I mean, he keeps pointing out she has that sad smile, which is a nice little bit that they do, because that is true. Like, people get this sad smile, like, oh, it's the last time,
or
and
remembrances, and
yeah,
exactly.
And she kind of tells him, like, look, I don't hate you anymore. I did at the end of the last episode. But I don't hate you anymore. And she has this quote that she picks up from somewhere. Hatred is too strong an emotion to waste on someone that you don't like. In other words, it's that old classic hatred. You don't hate people you don't care anything about. You hate people that you have a passionate reaction to, so to speak. Not necessarily passion in that sense, but like,
I don't know. I think that's a little trite, but
it is. I mean, because there are people who are hated who, you don't love, but
exactly.
But in the sense of, when just like in personal experience, there have been times where I've been, breaking up out of a relationship, and, you were in love, and now you just can't stand to be in the same room with that other person. And there's a reason for that that's related to, that's like, it's the equal and opposite reaction, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of weird. But in any sense, she's kind of saying she doesn't actually hate the doctor. So I'm not sure why that she brings it up then,
Well, because she's trying to say, basically, I've gotten over you.
Yeah.
And
that's what it is.
Because again, this was when she was still thinking this was the last trip. This was the last hurrah. And so she's like, no, I'm just with you to do this last trip, and then we're done. And, again, it's the breaking up where I've fallen out of love with you type of thing.
But there's that hint of she says, she says she's ready to leave him, but there's a hint that she's still, got this attachment, which, because at one point she says, I assume the doctor's, you'll come in for dinner occasionally after we're done.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, is that a thing? Like, and she's like, well, you think, and we know he doesn't do that. Like, the doctor doesn't go back and visit old companions.
No,
it's not like, once they're done out of the TARDIS, they're out of his life.
And that's definitely sounds like that awkward, we're breaking up, but I still kind of like you, but we really can't be in a relationship anymore like that. But I still want to see you once in a while. That kind of conversation. Friends. Yeah, let's be friends, which never works.
You
usually never works.
You can't be friends with an ex. Yeah. But it also raises the question, because this happens at the end of the episode, is Clara leaving the doctor more because of Danny pushing her? Because at the end, she basically lies to both Danny and the doctor, as you mentioned, that she tells Danny that she's left the doctor in the TARDIS, and then lies to the doctor and says that Danny's okay. It's his idea that that she stays with him, that he's okay with it now. That's
very much that addictive personality, though, isn't it? I mean, that's the I can quit at any time type of thing. Where it's like, oh yes, I can keep doing this. It'll be fine. No one needs to know.
Right. And you start lying to the people in your life about it. Yeah. Yep. But I kind of feel like Danny is the reason she's quitting. And
I think she, at least again in the previous episode, she had gotten so out, beyond her comfort zone. I mean, got pushed so far that she was serious about quitting at that time. But then, of course, they go on the last trip. And I would say even at the beginning of this episode, she was serious about quitting. But by the end, of course, it's that energy, that excitement, that adrenaline kicked in. It's like, no, I want to keep more of this. I like this.
Right. I want I guess what I'm getting at is she was really mad at the end of Kill the Moon. Mm-hmm. We all should have been. But but I wonder, without Danny, would she have just gotten over it on her own and not have resolved to leave the TARDIS? I feel like he was pushing her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think pushing is too strong. I think, encouraging, something more like encouraging or trying to help her, because as he said several times, he's been in that situation where just pushed too far and just has to, walk away and be done with it. Well,
I mean, it turns out Danny was right, wasn't he? Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
She gets killed and then
put in last undead. Heartbeat, time lock, something,
becomes a
whatever.
Zombie of some sort. Right. Yeah. So he wasn't wrong. This also, reminds me of why I hate what they did. Like what they end up doing with Danny is incomprehensible, because it doesn't make any sense.
He's a great character that should have been a part of much more, but
they seem to be building something, and then I don't know. Did the actor decide to leave? Did they decide that they couldn't work with him? It was a very strange, abrupt end. But we'll talk about that when we get to that episode.
There.
Yeah. So, talking about the mummy, it's called the Four-Toed. I guess it only has 4 toes. Just kidding. It's the Four-Toed. The Foretold. There's a myth of this mummy that if you see it, you're a dead man. The whole there's other sorts of those stories out there. And the clock starts ticking, 66 seconds. So you have the old lady who's the first to die. Everyone assumes, oh, she was an old lady. She's 100 years old. Of course, old people die. Yep. That's what the doctor says. The second to die is the chef named Stumpy, which a chef named Stumpy has a story.
Oh yeah.
I think the Stumpy had a misfire with a knife at one point.
Knife or a saw or something. Yeah.
Right. Now the chief security officer or something on board, the guy who's nominally in charge.
He was a conductor, I think. Kind of like what we would call the conductor here in the United States. I think they use the same term in England, but
yeah. I mean, if it was a spaceship, he'd be the captain, I suppose. His name is Quell, and the doctor confronts him because he basically calls him out. Says, "Look, you're a war veteran who is shell-shocked or something like that, and you sought a cushy job where you didn't have to do anything too dangerous or be confronted with anything, and now you wanted a cushy job until you could retire, but now you've been confronted with this situation and you're afraid to look into it. And of course, Quell, which is a great name for that sort of guy, because it sounds like quail. He rejects that at first, but then will later on admit to the doctor, "No, you're right. This was what it was doing." And the doctor kind of says to him at one point, "How many deaths is it going to take for you to stop looking the other way?" And later on, after the third person dies, Quell says 3.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah. Okay. I'm there. So I mentioned Perkins, and then Clara, meanwhile, while the doctor's running about, Clara, meanwhile, gets stuck in the baggage car with Maisie, who is the granddaughter of the old lady who first died in the first. And they're stuck there with her body is in there, but that's not what the main thing. There's a sarcophagus in there.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the sarcophagus was put there by Gus, who we initially know as the train's AI computer, but it's supposed to be the mummy. The mummy, once they've subdued the mummy, they're supposed to put him in it.
Yep, it's kind of like a stasis pod or something like that for the mummy trap, which is filled with bubble wrap, by the way. They made sure to emphasize that it had bubble wrap.
So now, while they're in there, Claire and Maisie have a couple of interesting conversations, including about why Clara's leaving the doctor and how Maisie tells her, you really look like someone, you don't look like someone who's done with him yet. And there's it's always couched in these terms like you would talk about a romantic interest, but there's clearly not a romantic interest between the doctor and Clara now, the 12th Doctor and Clara.
Nope.
Which I think is good. I'm glad that we're not doing The Doctor's My Boyfriend with the 12th Doctor and Clara, because it makes for a more interesting story and it removes some things that would be more confusing anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's good. We already done that with Amy and Rory in the 11th Doctor. We don't need to do that again.
Well, we even started to have it with Clara on the 11th Doctor, and then they had the first couple episodes, they had to kind of work through that, and that kind of shows the risk of that is when you do have these kind of changes, you've got to deal with the consequences of those changes if you're going to be consistent.
Right. Well, and especially like with Danny being in the picture, we'd be back to having that triangle again, which we've done. We don't need to do it again. In fact, they kind of keep doing these on and off things. Like, so Rose and the 9th Doctor,
were kind of off.
They didn't really have one, but the Rose and the 10th Doctor clearly did. Then Martha and the 10th Doctor clearly had or at least Martha did.
Martha was pining for him, that's for sure.
Right. Then you have Donna. There's, as they often told us, there's nothing there. And then we have
Boy, Space Boy, that ain't happening.
And then we have I can't wait to see them on screen again. By the way, that's going to be great.
Yes.
In the 60th. Then we have Amy and the 11th Doctor, and Amy and Rory and the 11th Doctor, and then the 11th Doctor and Clara. Those romantic notions, like, so with Amy there's initially a romantic notion, then there isn't, then Clara there is, and then there is. So there's been this off on, and even with the 13th Doctor they decided to do this with Yaz, and it's like, I just would love to go back to just being the Doctor and companions and